Well, it's about time. Guerin, Emig, and Bill Haisten back with you after a bit of a hiatus. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much for watching or listening. And thank you very much for reading our material at the Tulsa World. It's summertime, Bill, and that used to mean we throw it neutral for 10 weeks and not, don't bother us, put the don't bother us sign on the door and then reconvene when practice starts, football practice in August. But of course, that was before the issues of realignment and anything related to millions and millions of dollars came calling in college athletics. And now there's just as big a chance, if not more of one, that something big breaks in the so-called sleepy season as there is between September and May or April. And that's what happened yesterday with regard to USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. I'll start here. Did last summer's bomb dropped by Texas and Oklahoma, did that brunt the impact to you of yesterday's story, or was it still shocking to read that come across the line?
No, nothing yesterday shocked me. I was thinking about my personal reaction to Arkansas leaving the Southwest Conference in '92. That was shocking. I'd been in Texas most of my life, and there'd always been Arkansas in the SWC, and then they leave to go to the SEC, and that blew my mind. And then you have, for the most part, stability in conference membership until, 12 years ago? And then all the movement with Nebraska and Mizzou, and then West Virginia coming in to the Big 12. That was a shocking, really the only time I can truly say I was shocked by big sweeping changes in college football was that whole process. Nebraska, A&M, Colorado, them all getting out. And so, of course, last summer, yeah, of course, it was a shocker. But I just think my senses have been dulled a little. And just like in sports as a whole, there's just been so many outrageous stories and developments, tragedies. Not that this is a tragedy, I'm not saying that, but there's been so many shocking stories that I think it's going to take a lot for any of us to be shocked now. So no, I mean, it has felt for 12 years that we were heading here anyway, right? To a super heavyweight division, a true super heavyweight division. And it was kind of hypothetically discussed for a while. And now it's beyond imminent. It's going to happen. I mean, so no, it made me think more immediately, honestly, about schools like Tulsa and OSU. And I'll be talking to Rick Dixon later today. Poor Rick is fly fishing in Montana, I think, and trying to get away from it all. And he's got me texting him about all this yesterday. So like you say, there's not a slow season anymore. There's not a everybody take a step back and exhale season. Think about it too. I mean, most of these deals don't get like finalized, or these processes don't get finalized until in season. So it's and sports is such a big business now that I think we should kind of brace and always prepare and expect big stories like this at this time every year. And now this is 2 years in a row of blockbusters. Southern Cal in the Big Ten. How about that?
You mentioned Tulsa and Oklahoma State, and I want to get into this a little bit. It's interesting, the reaction if you're an Oklahoma fan, it's not like you sit this one out, because this will trickle down to this will trickle over, not down. There's no down to the SEC. This will trickle over to the SEC eventually, and maybe around the time the Sooners start playing ball in the SEC, we'll have a better idea of what that league, what the final conference membership is going to look like, assuming that they're going to counter USC and UCLA to the Big Ten with something. But Oklahoma's future set. They're going to be a player, clearly, in the SEC, one of the power twos, as I called it yesterday.
It is a power two.
The situation with Oklahoma State is obviously more complicated, because right now the Cowboys exist on the outside of that structure, and yet they've done a lot. And you know this as well as anybody. They've done so much the last, 8 to 10 years to position themselves to be a national player competitively. They're doing what they can financially, building the word is brand. That's the, the almost a cliched word for it now, but you know what I mean? They first under Mike Holder, now with Chad Weiberg, Mike Gundy being the constant behind all that, the driving force regarding the football revival. And so OSU is in a much better position to try to find a firm and lucrative role in the new power structure of college sports, but we're uncertain as to what exactly that is. And that I think is going to be the story to follow if you want to localize it. It obviously yesterday's bulletin had to do with 2 California programs and a Big Ten conference that folks around here pay attention to just as fans, but don't have any vested interest in. But because everything does tremor over, and the word that Chad Weiberg used yesterday with Jeremy Poplin on the Blitz was ripples, and there are going to be ripples, and they are going to arrive in Stillwater. We got to figure out what that means for the Cowboys.
Right.
Do you have an out of the box idea of what that means?
No, I don't. I listened to that Weiberg interview, and I just thought, 2 weeks after he became the AD last year, OU in Texas, that got leaked out of College Station. Now here he is coming up on a holiday weekend, and today, in fact, is the first anniversary of his appointment.
That's right.
Here we go again with him having to look into the future. See, I think OSU is outfitted for whatever's next. And is there going to be a place on the lifeboat for OSU? Well, it's certainly more likely or more plausible now than Holder, Boone Pickens, all the facilities development. I mean, you just shudder to think if they had done even only half of what they've done with facilities, it might not be enough. But because of that ballpark, because of all the other Olympic sports facilities they've developed, and because of a $300 million stadium renovation, and I think soon more eye candy for football will be announced. And it's good for OSU too. You know who would have been a great weapon for OSU right now? A great weapon would have been Boone Pickens circa 2007, when he was at the height of his powers, at or near the height of the high end of his wealth. And he was a really politically connected dude now. Boone Pickens. But you know who else is? I think Chad is. I think
I think you're right.
His relationship reach goes way beyond the Stillwater, Manhattan, Lubbock triangle. When those are the 3 main schools he's been associated with. But I think Chad, to his credit, it's almost like he's been grooming himself for a long time for this, maybe not this moment, because who could have seen all of this 15 years ago, but anticipating that he would be an AD. And he just seems like one of those people who has kind of prepared himself for a long time with relationships and being informed. And so I think Chad Weiberg is one phone call away from a lot of important people. And he has relationships at the network level too. Isn't that crazy too? That Big 12 rolls out a new commissioner, and then this pops. So an out of the box commissioner for sure. But that's going to be the way of the world from now on too. I think is you're not going to hire retired coaches or former coaches or even career administrators as much as you're going to hire savvy, media connected, media minded business people like the Big 12 just hired a Jay-Z associate. So
how about that?
Yeah.
The term that Weiberg, I sat down with Chad Weiberg at Big 12 spring meetings, Bill. Feels like 6 months ago. It was just a month ago. Mm-hmm. And we talked for an hour about him sort of, we did some step retracing with regard to how, from the time that OU in Texas, when that went public, through all that turmoil, through the addition of the 4 schools by Bob Bowlesby to counter OU Texas, and then all the way up to where we sat that day in down in Irving. And the phrase he used with me was, I feel like we're finally able to play offense after being on the defense for out of that, right out of that gate back in July, to your reference point, when he and Casey Schrum were officially introduced. And I saw that clearly. I saw clearly what he was talking about, because what Oklahoma and Texas did put everybody in the Big 12 on the defensive. And as much as you want to be proactive, of course, there was a lot of reacting going on to that story. But when everyone had a chance to gather, Weiberg, Schrum, and OSU included, you could start to see your way forward. And isn't it interesting now, as this could present another opportunity for Oklahoma State to do that? It could. What has to be realized, however, is that there are still things outside of OSU's control. None of us know, for all of the talk about, we want to cap this at 20 teams maybe per these 2 super conferences. I mean, we that's a number that I think is conveniently thrown out as where this is headed, but none of us know if that's where we're headed. Right. You have so many Notre Dame being maybe the wild card in all of this. What do the Irish decide to do with regard to football affiliation? Is this the time they finally suck it up and join a league?
They're going to join the Big Ten. Don't you think they'll join the Big Ten?
I would think they'd do that before the SEC.
Yeah.
And I'd probably think they would do that before the ACC. But that's just it. What if Notre Dame uses its affiliation with the ACC? What if Jim Phillips throws more weight around than we think he can as ACC's commissioner? And what if Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida State, ACC feels emboldened to go raid the Big 12 for Oklahoma State, and oh, by the way, picks off a couple of the hottest properties in the Pac-12 just to form sort of a third super conference? I mean, we're thinking in terms of, does OSU stay in the Big 12 or join one of the Power 2? Well, maybe there's a scenario where there is a Power 2.5 or Power Third in all of this. So all of this is to say that as much as Weiberg has finally reached a point where he can get out on the front foot to a lot of these issues, and what OU and Texas did last summer, now all of a sudden USC and UCLA go to the Big 10, and you wonder how much defense is all of a sudden being played again, even back at the Big 12 and in Stillwater. And that's got to be a real tough thing to wrap your head around if you're Chad.
I think there's unprecedented urgency with a lot of the schools on Oklahoma State's level with regard to these leagues creeping up toward the end of current television contracts or media rights contracts. And so I do think that I remember looking at all sorts of numbers and everything from athletics budgets to, and by the way, OSU this year for the fiscal year that starts now, I think OSU is at $100 million, which I think, what did I figure? 12 years ago, Guerin, they were at $49 million. They have doubled,
man,
in a decade.
Wow.
Yeah. And so OSU has proved this is going to be a little bit of a stressor, or maybe a great stressor with regard to the fan base of OSU, which has always been a smaller fan base, but a very loyal and true fan base, right? And but the pressure on the OSU fan base now to sustain itself as every game, 50, 52, 53,000 people in the stadium every week. I mean, it's greater than ever. It's not there's no luxury to it. It's an absolute must. And now Mike Gundy is, at least for the time being, the highest paid coach in the Big 12. So OSU has shown that it's not afraid to spend and invest in football. And I do believe, though, after all those that research I did a few months ago, I remember thinking, all right, so if you look at the obvious schools who would be in a super heavyweight division, who are the best available otherwise, like a Kuiper's best available, on the draft night.
Right.
And it was hard to argue that OSU you couldn't argue that OSU wouldn't be in at least the top 5 or 6 of that next best available list. And so when you talk about the possibility of a third power conference, I think OSU would fit right in. And I think OSU is going to find a place because of longevity with coaching, because they've had a string of 10-win seasons, because they did invest in the stadium. You know, and it's only a tiny piece of the puzzle, but it can't hurt that maybe their last football game they beat Notre Dame in an epic way.
Right.
So,
right.
I feel like OSU will land on its feet in a good place and in a good way, whether that's, like you say, as a member of one of these two, or a, you know, an upstart third league that might be driven by Clemson, maybe Notre Dame. I don't know. Notre Dame has historically been, you know, until 1970, Notre Dame they wouldn't even play in bowl games. And it was a big deal when Notre Dame agreed to play in the Cotton Bowl against Texas at that time. Oh my Lord, no, Notre Dame in a bowl. So I just think the time has come for them to, you know, I don't see the value anymore of them remaining independent, or whatever it is they are, an independent with a friend with benefits, I guess. I don't
It's about right. No, that's about right.
Yeah, right. Anyway, I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to look like for Tulsa. Although, I mean, you like the whole March Madness concept where everybody that's in has a chance, but in football, for sure, that hasn't been the case. That's never been the case. 6 to 12 teams every year that can win it, and maybe 10 to 20 teams that every year that can even justifiably think about it. So, you know, what happens with TU football? I think they'll still play 12 games every year and still have some sort of conference championship to shoot for, and a bowl game. And
yeah, you know, a mutual friend of ours asked me just today, and I wish, of course, at the time I didn't have the right way to explain how I felt about TU, you know, TU's potential place in all of this. And so I was sort of grasping it. I'm not sure what to call it. The only thing I know is that the relevance factor is a problem in the super conference era, place, you know, a program like TU. And I think 5-10 minutes later, it dawned on me that I think the way that I would go about phrasing this is that if we loop Tulsa in, well, not loop, they are there. If we label Tulsa a group of 5 school as they are right now with regard to football, because that's a defining term.
Sure.
If there is a super conference structure by 2024, and the SEC and the Big Ten towers over everything else, and it's, you know, it's scraps for the rest of the former Power Fives, and they're, you know, doing what they can to again maintain relevance or revenue, whatever you want to call it. In that era, Bill, TU feels almost like, the way I would describe it in today's terms, TU feels like 1AA. That's to me how it would look. That's sort of what kind of structure difference you're looking at.
Right.
And I thought D2, that's probably a little bit too stark, but don't you? I mean, that's almost as today's group of 5s, outside of the 4 that are going or the 3 from the American that are going to the Big 12, maybe Boise, maybe Memphis, because they're rumored to be next in line if the Big 12 were to expand. That was before yesterday. Below that level, and this isn't just TU, any current group of 5 program in the super conference era is pretty much 1AA.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, I've been to a lot of great concerts where the opening act was outstanding and kind of set the scene or set the table for a great night, right? And I think those schools are kind of going to be I think you'll see more Thursday and Friday games than ever before for them to have their window, and there's always going to be a place for those schools. But I mean, I don't know that they're not already viewed that way today anyway. Not everybody watches as intently or with the same kind of eyes that you and I do. I'm talking about college football as a whole. So I can watch a South Alabama game. If I tune into a South Alabama game against a conference opponent and it's deep third quarter and it's tied and it's like obviously an entertaining game, I'm gonna stay with it. I think a lot of people they're going to watch the Sooners. They're going to watch the Crimson Tide. Anybody in the top 10 maybe, but their consumption may not go to the level that mine does. I'm always going to be aware of and connected to all levels of major college football because there are multiple levels. But I don't think this makes the American or the Mountain West or any other kind of seem like 1AA. Yeah, they already seem like 1AA. It's not to say you can't get great football out of them. And Cincinnati crashed the party in the playoff last year, and Tulsa nearly crashed the party for Cincinnati out at Cincinnati. Came that close to beating them. So it's still relevant, very interesting football. And I don't know that those schools necessarily Guerin lose a whole lot of their market share they have today. But I mean, they're going to probably gain much more, if any, either. I mean, it's just going to be a different deal. It's going to be, I've seen a lot of comparisons to, AFC and NFC is what you're going to have in college football. And it's correct. You're just going to have ultimately, how many teams on each side of that AFC, NFC deal? Oh my gosh, it's going to break a lot of hearts when they get to that number.
It's interesting you use that term. I wanted to ask how you felt about all this, and I do that because I'm thinking to how even 2000, I think 2000, this is 2022, 2012 me would have been pretty blown away by all this. 2002 me would have been pretty pissed off by all of this because I think I still would have had some college athletics or college football purity in me, right? Or romanticism. I mean, I think I was on my way to being jaded and cynical, but I wasn't all the way there yet. Right now, though, man, I mean, we've been hit with so much for so long, and we've seen the grind of the corporate structure and we see the dollar figures. We see ESPN shelling out $3 billion to take the SEC away from CBS. We see football coaches making $10 million a year. You know what I mean? It just beats you down, doesn't it? And you want to sort of make a stand or some, stand on some kind of a moral high ground and say, what, my old friend Seth Emerson, who I got to know once upon a time when he was when he covered he was covering an SEC school back about 15 years ago. I ran into him at an NCAA regional when they were he was covering South Carolina, and they thought for sure that they were going to get Jeff Capel. Remember him, Jeff Capel, the Blake Griffin's OU basketball coach. And so we've struck up a relationship since then, on and off. And he wrote a great piece in the Athletic today about what are we doing here? I mean, what should we stop and consider what's going on? And it was a great piece, and I agreed with 98% of what Seth wrote. And yet when I put it away, I was like, well, but what are you going to do about it? And should I feel guilty for saying, what are you going to do about it, is my question.
I think too about everything that's not football and how much, I mean, for so long, there was great stability in the conference, the composition of these leagues, and the geographic relevance of these leagues. And my state's better than your state, border states, and now, Texas and A&M haven't played in more than a decade now, and Missouri and KU haven't played in football in more than a decade now. And so, no, I mean, yeah, it bothers me. I mean, I wouldn't say I mean, when Arkansas left the Southwest Conference, that was really shocking to me, and that really jarred me. And that's when I realized, yeah, the SWC is doomed. But then the Big 12 seemed to be the perfect league for anybody in this part of the country, and it was. I mean, think about it. I mean, driving distance, that many rivals within driving distance of each other, right up and down I-35, perfect league, and it was short-lived relatively, and so I just don't know about the wisdom of taking Southern Cal volleyball team to Rutgers, for a competition. I wonder if common sense might prevail on the other sports to have alliances or even conferences that are completely separate from football. That's that's a lot of expense and a lot of hassle and a lot of wear and tear on young athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Go cross country for a regular season volleyball match or whatever. That's ridiculous. Football is such a big monster, and they travel. Honestly, most programs now travel very comfortably. They do. OSU has flown charters exclusively for a long time. OU as well. I think TU actually even charters most of their trips, if not all now.
Mm-hmm.
So these football teams travel comfortably on their schedule, with their food, and so I'm not so much worried about the grind of the travel on the football kids, because they can do it in a way that these other kids having to travel commercially.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not a good model. So I think eventually, if not imminently, that you're going to see football not only just make its own rules, but football just be in its completely own universe, and then everybody else kind of figure it out as they go. And I don't think football is going to give a half of a damn about how they get it done. It's just that we're football. This is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And the rest of you guys figure out your stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm going to miss so many of the traditions. I already do miss so many of the traditions. I mean, watching the Aggies and the Longhorns on Thanksgiving, I mean, that was a staple for a long time. It's Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving Day itself. That was a staple. And so that's been taken away from us. OU Nebraska, are you kidding me? I mean, what a great rivalry, and it's gone. So, there's part of me that's sad about it, but there's part of me too that would I want to go back to, what the National Football League looked like in 1958? No, I like the NFL as it is now. It just takes some getting used to,
Yeah, that's it. That's just it, isn't it? I mean, everyone adjusts and moves on and gets used to it. But if you allow yourself to stop and think about how we're getting where we're going, I think it can be sad and a little bit, just a lot of it tough to digest as to how we've gotten. And again, not everything about this era of everyone out to get theirs is wrong. I mean, you take something like NIL, something that should have been done years ago, and put money in the hands and accounts of athletes based on these these dollar figures we're talking about. That part is progress. All the other mechanisms around college football in particular and college sports in general, they don't go down as easy. And if you do allow yourself to over a beer or a glass of wine, or you just can't sleep at night for whatever reason, if you think long enough about it, you get a little depressed. Is all I'm saying. And maybe
it would be amazing though to be able to eavesdrop on some of the conversations Joe Castiglione is having with various people right now, and some of the conversations Chad is having with people around the country, and just to get a feel for possibilities, especially on the OSU side of it.
Well, there may come that day where Chad Weiberg, and this is a guy I saw have a conversation over lunch with Joe Castiglione, so it's not like they're not on speaking terms over what happened 11 months ago, right?
Right.
They're professionals, like you'd expect them to be, but they're going to come a point pretty soon, something tells me, where that dialogue is going to pick up from OSU standpoint. They're going to be interested in continuing a dialogue if they feel Oklahoma can vouch or help in any way, shape, or form to get them, assuming the SEC is where they want to go, to get them where they want to go. And that's to say that we assume that that's where they want to be or go. I don't know.
We've talked a half hour, and we have, or right at a half hour, we haven't even talked about, and we're not going to today. That's something we can talk about in August. But the trickle down effect with the freedom of player movement at the college level, what I have seen over the last 6 weeks in high school football.
I was gonna bring it up as something that we need to put on the agenda for next time.
Sure. Well, I mean,
has it quiet? Let me ask you this: has it quieted down?
Well, I mean, it's not like they put out press releases. So I mean, there could be
well, that's true.
There could be movement like yesterday, today, this weekend that I'm not even aware of. Yeah. I think there's been some copycat movement where maybe a kid or a family looks and says, "Hey, they did it.
Yeah, right.
Let's go." And but it's been an unbelievable last 6 weeks or so. Player movement, and to have an eighth grader will be a ninth grader. Actually, I guess officially is a ninth grader now, from Los Angeles. He has offers already from Oregon, Arizona, Texas A&M, Florida State. He's about to get one from Georgia, and he's about to get one from Texas before he's ever taken a varsity snap. And he moves from Los Angeles, where he was considering schools like Modern Day for his high school, and he moves to Jinx, where his dad was a championship quarterback there almost 30 years ago. And his dad is a Hollywood actor and producer, and he's going to move his entire film production company to Tulsa, P12 Films, Brian Presley. And then the quarterback at Jinx last year was a ninth grader. He now's at Union, which is like if a quarterback won the national title at OU and then transferred to Texas the next year. So anyway, yeah, we get to August and we see how all this shakes out and who is where. And hey, you know what? I will predict this before we disconnect.
Sure. Yeah.
There'll be more movement. There'll be a second wave of movement. There'll be another wave of movement in August. After kids get into camp and you start seeing how reps are divided up, there'll be more of this in August. And it'll probably be might be at a greater volume. And this has just been so remarkable lately because it involved so many high profile quarterbacks. I went to a 7-on-7 at Owasso last week, and everywhere you look around, there's a well-known, talented quarterback in a different uniform now. And there's a reason now these kids complete 68% instead of 53% like they did 20 years ago, because they do this all year long, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm picturing a coach right now counting kids as he loads the van up to take him back to his campus from that 7-on-7. An afterthought until right now, and he's literally said, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have them? Do I have all 7? Seriously?
Right.
Or do we have a representative who's walking my kid over to the coach I just
right? Or if your rival's van or bus is passing you on the highway and your starting quarterback is on that bus waving.
That's about where we are.
It is actually. The Jinx thing. The kid practiced with the Trojans.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
The next day was with Union on May 27th.
That's unbelievable.
Of a team camp. So yeah.
Makes for a salty fall of 22, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. You kidding me? I mean, Jinx Union, week 2. Is it week 2 or week 3? Anyway, it's in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Bixby Owasso on opening night at TU. There'll be 25,000 there for that. Mark my word. And Bixby's starting quarterback, I'm guessing, will be their starting quarterback. He was at Owasso last year. So
yeah,
it's crazy.
And to think we once wondered if we'd have things to talk about as sports writers in the middle of summer. That the day is gone. So
well,
makes our jobs interesting.
We could count on the Thunder making a deep playoff run, but
well, we could have spent a half hour on the draft and Durant's little latest 4th of July week charade, and Lou Dort. Could have talked about Lou Dort.
Lou Dort got a lot of money, man.
Lou Dort some people say Lou Dort got too much money.
Well, it's averaging out at about 17.5 million.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, man. He's got a lot of value, but that's a ton of money. Kevin Durant, though, where he ends, I guess it's the Phoenix is most speculated as his landing spot, but and what Phoenix would have to give up to get him would be unprecedented.
Yeah,
that level of talent plus picks going back to Brooklyn, be unbelievable. So I don't know. I don't blame Kevin Durant for wanting to leave, because Kyrie Irving is a team wrecker. He's a culture wrecker. But I mean, Kevin left 6 years ago this weekend. That's been 6 years ago. I could ramble forever about that week. Wow. I just don't know what it'll ever take to make him happy.
I don't think he's going to be.
I don't either.
He's a man destined to just not be at peace, which is a shame.
Yeah, it is. All right, Guerin.
I missed you. It's good to see you again. Thanks for watching, listening, folks, and for reading most of all. We'll do this again soon, I promise.